Welcome to Evolving Workflows, How Necessity Breeds Ingenuity. Today we're going to be talking about the inherent challenges that we had at our school district, the game plan that we developed around those challenges, and then the initial workflow, what we did to overcome those challenges, and then some new challenges that came from that workflow, how we corrected those, and then what we're living with today. So my name is Justin Phillips. I'm a help desk trainer specialist. I work for the instructional television department at the Polk County Public Schools. I've been here for about 16 years now, going on 17, and I'm joined here with my coworker, Kyle.
Hey, everybody. I'm Kyle Condon, and I'm also a help desk trainer specialist there at ITV for the Polk County Public Schools. And I have been in this department for about 14 years and have always been around Apple devices as well. So, yeah.
Well, cool, Kyle. Let's get right into this because we don't have much time and we have a lot of info. So when we first were going to be given the Apple support for the district, we had some initial challenges. We had a previous MDM solution that we were using for about 2 years, a little under, and that had a lot of problems that we had to look into. We did a lot of surveys through the county and all. Our district is fairly large. We have over 120 schools with over 100,000 students. And like I mentioned, the MDM that we had roughly just a little under 10,000 iPads that were enrolled at that time. Up until that MDM solution was put into place, we would estimate that roughly 99% of the staff had never touched an Apple device. We were a Windows-only district for probably about 20-ish years. And so that was going to be a major challenge for us to start getting Apple devices into kids' hands and to train tech staff on how to manage those. So that was going to be one of the other challenges, was to how do we train all those network managers, our school-based tech staff. The other major problem that we had was that we had an 802.1x Wi-Fi network, and each of our 120 plus schools had their own Radius server with their own authentication certificates that would expire annually. So that was going to be a major problem every year. And then on top that all off, because it was just Kyle and I. So we had to figure out how to do all this with just two people. So the game plan that we came up with, we wanted to make sure that we created a workflow that was easier than the previous MDM solution that we had. Because the survey that we got back, the results basically said that was the biggest headache with Apple deployment in the county was the previous MDM solution. And just because it was only Kyle and I, we wanted to make sure that we leveraged the school techs, the network managers at each school. So we wanted the workflow to not involve Kyle and I at all, if possible. And because the county was so Apple phobic, I guess you could say, we wanted to provide one-on-one trainings and some group trainings to those network managers. And then just as an additional level of support, we wanted to create concise, step-by-step online documentation for each one of the processes and the workflows that we were going to be developing. So the workflow that we came up with, I'll try to go through this real quickly. So the network manager would connect a cart to a Mac, and using Configurator, they would export all the serial numbers to a spreadsheet. Then they would go into Apple School Manager. They would just copy those serial numbers and then do an assignment into their MDM server. And then once that MDM server that was associated with their school, so each school had their own MDM server, they would go into the pre-stage that they would create per cart. So if a school had 8, 9, 10 carts, they would have 8, 9, 10 pre-stages. And then they would just assign those serial numbers to that pre-stage. So then they would go in and they would create a smart group based off that pre-stage. So the criteria would be, enrollment method or enrollment pre-stage method is, and then they would name the pre-stage. So then, because we had certificates that we had to deal with, they would have to create a new user in Active Directory so that the Wi-Fi profile that they would have to create in Configurator had to embed those credentials with the Radius certificates into it. And then they had to take that profile and then upload it to Jamf so that it would get pushed to the iPads as they enrolled. and then they would go to configurator, and then they would go through the prepare action to enroll them. Okay.
So with that previous workflow, we used that for about, I'd say 6 to 7 months, and it was working great until we hit probably about 2,500 to 3,000 iPads. And because of that, we were actually starting out Jamf on premise, and we've soon realized that our server hardware wasn't really suitable or scalable for mass deployment. As Justin said before, we had a ton of MDM servers linked to our Jamf console, and we often noticed that sometimes serial numbers would be assigned to the wrong MDM server. We would get a call saying, "Hey, I can't see my serial numbers in my pre-stages. What's going on?" And we would come to find out they would be assigned to a different MDM server, which caused a Jamf product issue that was unknown at the time, and it caused ghost records, and it just basically exploded from there. It basically, when an iPad would be enrolled, it would kind of add another record on top of that. So that was a big issue, and it was causing some major slowdowns. Before, we had about 1,000 or more pre-stages. That drastically slowed the ASM to Jamf syncing. And the pre-stage enrollments, we found out that it was kind of a difficult grasp to concept, or a difficult concept to grasp for the network managers, mainly just because of all the steps, all the checkboxes. It was just complicated. So we wanted to pretty much figure out a way to alleviate that from them. The other thing that we ran into was the Wi-Fi network. As Justin said before, each school had their own radio server, and they had certificates that expired annually. And with our shared deployment that we had, whenever that certificate expired, then they would just drop off Wi-Fi. And another thing too with those AD accounts is when the cart would enroll 40 or 30 at a time, the AD server kind of figured that it was being attacked because all those devices were being using the same account for authentication. So they thought that it was being attacked. So it just locked out and no network. So some of the corrections that and simplifications that we wanted to go through was, with that previous workflow, we weren't really satisfied just because of all the failure points that could happen. And the other thing too is our network managers, the tech people at the school, have other responsibilities. They're not just doing Apple products. They're fixing printers, they're fixing projectors, doing bus duties, lunch duties, pretty much any other tasks as assigned. Another thing that we noticed too is our on-premise implementation. We decided to move to Jamf Cloud, mainly because of the scalability and to help out with our new workflow that we're wanting to develop. Another thing too is our MDM servers. We wanted to reduce those from around 120 plus down to 3. And we were actually able to do that when ASM allowed us to assign the new devices in our MDM based off of device type. So like Apple TVs, iPads, and Macs can automatically be put into their own MDM. Another thing too was that we wanted to alleviate the responsibility of the pre-stage enrollments for them. So we basically deleted all of the old pre-stages, which is over 1,000, and we consolidated that down to 5, which greatly increased the speed of our server, mainly because we didn't have to constantly contact ASM. And our biggest thing and huge overhaul was our Wi-Fi network. I actually got a call from our networking team and our computer repair department and said, "Hey, we want to convert all the access points to the cloud, to a cloud management service." So with that, we have to basically redesign it anyways. And we know that Apple devices don't technically like the current Wi-Fi setup. So come on down, we'll have a meeting, which was huge breakthrough. And so we converted, we actually got our own SSID, and we went from a WPA2 Enterprise to a WPA2 personal account. And so instead of authenticating through Active Directory accounts, we actually are authenticating with a single PSK, which is super long, and it's embedded into an enrollment profile. With all of those changes, we were able to develop a bash script called Atlas. And this ran from self-service. And so whenever the network manager wanted to enroll devices, they first needed to assign those devices to their own pre-stage. Now, since they don't have access to pre-stages anymore, we took that away from them. They had to assign it somehow. And we didn't necessarily want to assign all those devices because we were onboarding, probably about 1,000 devices a month. It was insane for a little bit. So this bash script ran from self-service. It uses Cocoa Dialog as the GUI, and it uses the CFG util for device interaction. And it basically just goes through 3 steps. It says, hey, welcome to Atlas. And then it asks the number of devices that are connected just as a confirmation page, because they had a card of 25. We want to make sure that all 25 are being read. And then the next one is what do you want this device to be? Do you want this to be a standard iPad, a shared iPad, or a one-to-one iPad? So they would just select that, and then it would assign that pre-stage. So our initial workflow looked like this. Justin went over this earlier. Obviously, a lot of steps, a lot of points of failure. So we wanted to basically consolidate that into a more efficient way of doing things. Instead of starting off with exporting serial numbers, they don't need to do that anymore. They just need to start off with creating a smart device group, which allowed them to basically just organize those devices once they come in. And it's easier for them to see, if you have a card of 25 and there's 25 in the smart group after you enroll them, you're in good shape. So they created a smart group. Then they installed an enroll blueprint from self-service, which had the automated enrollment package in it, and it had the Wi-Fi profile baked into that. So first off, they went in and wiped the devices in Configurator. Then they made and applied a naming blueprint, because all of the smart groups used to be called, or their criteria used to be, if the pre-stage is this, then put it into the smart group. Now it's actually, if the device name is like this, now put it into the smart group. So we definitely needed to make sure that they applied that correct naming blueprint. And then the next step was to run Atlas, and that actually tells Jamf how to treat those devices once they come into the server. And then they would just apply that enroll blueprint that they downloaded from self-service from before. But this process was great. It lasted probably about, I'd say, a good half a year, another 6 months or something like that. But there were still points of failure that we were running into. Basically, the big thing was not naming the devices correctly. Sometimes the network managers would forget to apply the naming blueprint, and they would all be enrolled as iPad. And then, they weren't actually put into their smart groups. So that's why we developed a Mac app.
Yeah, so like Kyle said, there was still some points of failure that we wanted to alleviate. And we decided, you know what, this is all great. We can do all this with a script, but what if we could force them through a workflow that's more streamlined? And I kind of wanted a Swift project anyway to learn the programming language. So that's why we developed Atlas as a Mac OS native app. So basically the workflow changed from everything that Kyle was just talking about to the network manager would go into Jamf. They would create a device smart group, and then they would run their cart through Atlas, and that's it. There is no step 3, right? So Atlas would do all the assignments, all the naming, all the wiping, all the enrolling, everything. They don't even have to open Configurator at all. So I just wanted to take a quick look through of what the Atlas app looks like. So I have Configurator open. I would have liked to have done this with the cart full of like 30 iPads, but the whole COVID thing hit, and I only had like one test iPad with me at the time. So this is the home screen of Atlas. Just has a nice little video that we shot. But then the network manager just logs in with their username, And then we use the Jamf API to authenticate that username. And they're presented with the first screen, which is a setup screen, where they select one of 3 of our device types, which are standard, shared, which is like shared iPads, and then one-to-one. If they don't know what the difference is, if they're a new network manager, we have a nice little help menu here that pops out that gives them a brief explanation of what the 3 differences are. And they even see a little preview image over on the right. And if they need further help, the help menu, it links them directly to our online documentation that I mentioned earlier. So they'll go ahead and select one of the 3 device types, hit continue, and it takes them to the devices tab. Now this will go and use the CFG util from configurator and go out and grab all the serial numbers from the connected devices. And they want to make sure that they can see if they have 30 iPads in their cart, that 30 are showing here. And if not, we have a troubleshooting tips button that they can click to help troubleshoot why some might be not showing up. We also have an export serial numbers feature. So if they ever have to, for whatever reason, keep records of serial numbers per cart, they can do that into a spreadsheet. We also have a warranty checker. Sometimes we get some random questions of asking if something is under warranty. So really all they need to do is just connect the cart to Atlas, select one of the serial numbers on the left, hit check warranty button, and then there we go. It brings up the warranty webpage from Apple. So once they like that, they can hit continue and it takes them to the options page. Here's where kind of the magic of Atlas happens. They could basically, whether they want to delete the record and from Jamf before it enrolls, which is typically a good idea, they could wipe or restore the devices here. We ask them to put in their school location number. This usually gets auto-filled when they log in with their NetAdmin account. And then they can either enroll directly into a smart group that they already have set up, or they can do a custom name here. So they can just type in whatever we want. So here I'm just typing in JNUC 2020 as an example. And they get a little preview at the bottom what all the devices from this cart's going to be called. They can hit continue. And then we get a nice little kind of preview screen before they hit go. Then they hit enroll. And then I think I'm going to move the screen over here real quick so we can see what's happening in configurator as this is going by. So since I had all the default options turned on, the device is going to do a simple erase all content and settings. And then Atlas in the background is using the API with the great new pre-stage enrollment endpoint through the API. And it's assigning the device to the standard pre-stage. And then it's going to wait for the device to come back online. Then it's going to rename the device. And as soon as it renames it, it's going to install the Wi-Fi profile, which has our WPA2 personal, the PSK credentials embedded into it so that it can automatically connect to our network. Which that takes a little bit. And okay, now we flipped over to the enrolling devices. So this is basically just using the CFG util prepare statement to get all the devices enrolled into Jamf. It usually takes about 10 minutes for a cart full of 30. The whole process takes about 15 to 20 minutes if you decide to erase the contents of the iPad. So what's going on behind the scenes, really? So in Jamf, we have a site that sits at the top level that we call onboarding. All devices go through this site, no matter if it's a Mac or a TV OS or an iPad OS. It all goes into onboarding. And then we have a script that sits on another server that every couple of minutes, it looks at all the devices that are in onboarding, and it looks at the first 4 characters of the name. And that is the naming convention where we have the location number of the school. So then each school has their own site. So then that script just moves, using the API again, just moves that device to that school site. And then the school has a smart group set up like we talked about earlier, and then the device just populates it, and then any profiles or any content that they have pushed down to that smart group automatically gets start putting onto that device. So what are some other automation apps that we've made? So to facilitate the one-to-one process, we made an app called Rapid Launch, which is for iPad OS and tvOS. And this basically just guides a user. They don't have to know anything about Apple. It's all friendly, help me along kind of GUI. And they just can select the school, and then we know what the location number is, and we rename the device, and it gets enrolled into Jamf. For the Macs, we're using Nomad Login and Nomad and Dep Notify to do our Mac registration stuff. And the Dep Notify, they just put in their first dot last name, what school, they just select from a list, whether they're a student or a teacher machine that they're setting up, and the asset tag of the machine. Kyle?
Yeah, so some of the obviously, Atlas is doing pretty well right now. That we definitely want to add some future updates to Atlas. As before, Justin was saying that now we're only down to like 2 steps, which still has you bouncing back in between Jamf and Atlas. But we're wanting to have the ability to create smart groups straight from the GUI, straight from Atlas. And that pretty much just eliminates everything that you needed to do in Jamf prior to onboarding iPads. So whenever you get a new cart of iPads from Apple, you just open Atlas and you can do everything from there. We also wanted to add a mass update device information via spreadsheet. We know that there's also an open source software called Mutt that can do this, but we would like to basically make it more personal and make it more unique to our school district. So with that, they could actually update asset tags, any extension attributes that we may have available. Now, the biggest thing that helped us through all this is to make sure that you have some of the best support that we can provide. First off, we started off with Slack as like a chat room style troubleshooting. And then we moved on to Teams because our network managers have been using that for other things as well. So we just added an Apple channel into that. And over the past year, that has really exploded. And a lot of the network managers, if they had any questions, just a quick question on how to do a certain thing, the other network managers are then there to help and assist with that. Also, our online documentation, it's a great way to just shoot a quick link over to something like, hey, how do I deploy an app, or how do I purchase licenses of an app? Then we can just copy and paste that link and says, hey, here's the step-by-step instructions. Go through it whenever you want. And then the last thing is definitely in your organization, try to identify and utilize some key personnel. If you have any other tech people out there that are techie and they want to help, by all means, get it, because we have one person, one network manager that helps us out a lot. Her name is Tara Holly. Shout out to you. She is a great asset to our department because after probably about a year into Jamf, she actually came to us and she's like, hey, do you guys need any help with facilitating questions or anything like that? And we're like, absolutely, because I mean, there's only 2 people. So having her on board is a godsend, pretty much. It's so definitely look out for those type of people that if they ask you, if you know, do you need any help? Take it. So I kind of want to wrap up with a little bar graph that we made. With the previous MDM, it took about 40 hours. It took about a whole week to enroll like a cart or 2 of iPads. With our initial workflow that we made, drastically lowered that. People were able to onboard iPads very, very quickly. And then we made advances with the Bash version. And of course, we're cutting down the time that it takes with the general Mac app. So that's been really cool. right. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching our presentation. I know I had fun trying to explain our our troubles that we had in the past. And looking back, when I was talking to Justin earlier, we kind of, when we were making this presentation, we were like, man, why did we do that? But we just didn't know what we didn't know. And then we had, certain aspects of the process. Obviously the technology wasn't there yet. So as we started to develop things, that's when things started coming down the pipe, like API, using the API in Jamf, and them adding more and more capabilities to the API really helped us automate a lot of things. So definitely
I just wanted to say, definitely wanted to say real quick that thank you to Jamf for being a leader and trying to give us the tools to be able to do this, because without the new pre-stage endpoints and a lot of stuff being added to the API, it would be, Kyle and I pulling our hair out trying to help a lot of these people figure out how to do this stuff. So thanks for listening. Thanks for attending. Go ahead and fill out that survey, and just thanks.